First, though, a quick recap of what the spy agency has said, issuing a pre-election warning to foreign powers as we enter a worsening security environment, not just for the next couple of years, but over the next few decades. Let's hear from our reporter, Ruben Spargo.
ASIO is moving to neutralise interference operations and politically motivated violence. During an address to the intelligence community and foreign diplomats, the Director-General delivered a sobering annual threat assessment.
We are likely to have more security surprises in the second half of the decade than we did in the first. Australia has never faced so many different threats at scale at once.
Mike Burgess revealed state-sponsored murder plots on home soil and spies who are targeting AUKUS secrets. The Defence Minister claims Australia is not immune from the world's current volatile nature.
We are significantly increasing our national capability in terms of defence, and that in turn has a number of countries looking at us.
Particularly bleak and sobering security assessment from the Director-General, even by the standards of the annual threat assessment. I am, of course, very concerned, as I know many Australians will be.
With the election to be held amid a surge in anti-Semitic attacks, Australia's spy chief fears things will worsen. To protect the integrity of the upcoming poll, ASIO created specialist teams to work with the Electoral Commission.
Quite alarming and shocking to hear, that other countries have this intention to cause harm.
China's ambassador to Australia attended the annual security speech for the first time. The spy boss is making it clear to all hostile countries, you have been warned and the agency is acting.
Joining me live in the studio is the ASIO Director-General Mike Burgess, the Director-General of Security. Thank you so much, as always. I just want to pick up on one of the guests, and that being the Chinese ambassador being there. Why was that invitation extended?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kieran. Well, ambassadors represent their countries, and every year we invite ambassadors from foreign nations to come along and listen to the threat assessment. This year, I thought, let's invite the Chinese ambassador. Isn't it great we live in a country where ambassadors can come along and hear the head of the security service outline the threats to the people we protect and do that in an open way? They can be left in no doubt where and what the issues are for us, and that's all part of the important relationship we need to have with all nations.
It was quite blunt at one point, though, particularly when it comes to the AUKUS warning. For those that might not have caught up with it, being in the room when you and hearing your address, you spoke about the threat to Australia's defence capacity and our assets like AUKUS into the future, and you said if any country has designs on trying to mess with that, we will respond forcefully, and you've been warned. It was like you had done it in person to some of those present.
That was done deliberately. You know, you're speaking to head of an intelligence agency. There's no such thing as a casual conversation or a casual presentation. While I'm explaining the threats to people we protect, yes, I was putting on notice foreign intelligence services. We see you interested in AUKUS. We see what you're doing. When we see you, we will deal with you. We will deal with your agents. So they're the people they recruit in this country to give them the information they're looking for. But also said, we'll deal with your intelligence officers. So they're on notice. We know they're interested. They're allowed to be interested, but they're not allowed to get the information. And I'm doing my bit to make sure my agency helps Defence deliver AUKUS capabilities that our nation so critically needs.
Is it the I don't suspect you're going to go through the countries, but is it the usual suspects that we would, or would we be surprised if we knew all the nations that are interested in trying to spy on AUKUS? Yeah,
I think you'd be surprised. And in my remarks last night, I actually said there's a range of countries that are doing this. Some of them also we consider friendly. No real surprise there for people in my profession, but maybe for your viewers and fellow Australians, they might be surprised by that.
Well, the nest of spies was from a friendly country, wasn't it? Back in a few years ago.
It was.
It wasn't who many of us sort of suspected.
Yeah. The key point for me is I get the speculation.
That being India, by the way, for those that...
I'm not commenting on or confirming or denying. So the key point for everyone is multiple countries do this. And let's be honest, Australia has a national intelligence community that is tasked with collecting foreign intelligence on behalf of the Australian government. So we do this to other nations as well.
But we do it by the rules of the road. And you said last night there are some that are basically ignoring any rules, that are not just blurring them, they're wiping them out. I was, like many of our viewers would have been shocked that some agencies are trying to target Australians, maybe diaspora from other nations, expats or whatever, but trying to kill them here.
Yep. So absolutely. So as I said, spy book, if there was a book of rules for spying, some of those lines are being jumped over or deliberately rubbed out, and the book is being rewritten. We have seen nation states overseas, and we've seen nation states, more than one, attempt to lure Australians from this country so an accident could happen and that accident could harm them or kill them. We've seen a foreign intelligence service plot early stages to actually look at harming Australians on Australian soil. The good thing that I can tell your viewers, and I must reinforce this, whilst my assessment was a bleak outlook, every one of those things I talked about last night, we had stopped. We got them early and we stopped them. You can have assurance that Australia's security service is on the case. The reason why I gave that threat assessment is to explain the threats to the people we protect. We need their help. We can't do it alone. But we were effective and we stopped every single one of those plots.
And when did they happen?
They happened over the last several years.
Okay, so some as recently as last year.
Correct.
Yeah, it's quite shocking, the fact that an agency might be brazen enough to try and wipe someone out, a critic of the home government. Is that basically
correct? And totally unacceptable. We wouldn't do that. Our government doesn't ask its intelligence agencies to do such thing, but authoritarian regimes do, or other countries which we might consider democracies might also do the same thing.
We're going to have the anti-Semitism summit shortly, and we'll go there live to hear from former Prime Minister Howard and other dignitaries. But from your perspective, you don't think that threat has plateaued. How much worse is it likely to get?
Okay, so to be clear, I said I have concerns it has not yet plateaued. So that's not saying it's still increasing, but I'm not yet seeing the conditions to say that actually we've bottomed out or topped off. So that is an ongoing concern.
So it's a question mark.
It's a question mark. Of course, anti-Semitism, sadly, has been a thing, and it festered in our country long before the 7th of October 2023. Of course, we then saw it immediately raise its ugly head even before the Israeli government took action against Hamas. That must concern every Australian that this can be a thing. And we've seen those threats transition from intimidation and harassment to direct targeting of communities, places of worship, and prominent Jewish Australians.
How does that happen? When just to read from your speech, the normalisation of violent protest and intimidating behaviour lowered the threshold for these sorts of acts. How does that work in your mind?
So there's a number of things at play here. One, for you and I, anti-Semitism defies logic. Don't know how it happens, but sadly it's still a thing. You remember shortly after the 7th of October, I put out a public statement, which is rare for me to do. I did that because we knew there was a link between inflamed tensions, inflamed language that leads to violence. We knew this would be a hot issue. Yes, people have a right to demand a Palestinian state and to call for that. They have a right to protest about that in our country. But when we see those protests turn to hatred and incitement of violence, that's of concern. The long drawn-out conflict hasn't helped, of course, but it doesn't excuse it. And Kieran, if I can be so blunt, for me, it defies logic that there are people in this country that actually can hold Jewish Australians to account for the actions of the Israel state. That defies logic. It defies logic they can hold the state, territory and federal government to account for actions of another nation. All of that is plainly absurd and ridiculous. I get the heat of the motions, but it defies logic. That hasn't helped. The bit about normalised behaviour, where you see violent action or protest, if it's left unchecked and not challenged, people get permission to do the same or more, and that is of concern.
Is there anything you can share with our viewers when it comes to those that might be meddling in this scourge of anti-Semitism, but from afar, that might be meddling in it? Is that happening?
Sure. So I'll give you my perspective, or our agency's perspective. We're a security service. First and foremost, we'll help our police mates, and it's important the police are allowed to do their job. We're looking at a number of serious anti-Semitic incidents in isolation and with our police mates. All of those we're looking at, we don't see one single connection behind every single one of them. That's an important point. We don't believe there's one mastermind behind all of this. Of course, for some cases, we're still trying to understand. We might know who did it, but we don't understand their motivations. That's the work for the police, that's the work for the security service, and we'll continue to work that hard. Until we get to those points, and each one of those has to be taken on a case-by-case basis, we won't know the answer to that question, but I'm not expecting one foreign mastermind behind this. We have to consider, and it's highly likely and in fact true, this is homegrown.
Homegrown and often very young, some of the culprits, as you said last night. You took the extraordinary move to declassify the outlook out to 2030. But the thing that jarred with me, and I think with many parents and grandparents watching, is that the young involved are getting younger.
Yeah, so this is more broader than anti-Semitism, but actually we have minors who are getting caught up in violence. It's clear they're not generally caught on ideology, even though they might be dabbling in neo-Nazis or Islamic State propaganda. They're just attracted to violence. But that's a concern in our society. During the height of COVID, 50% of our counter-terrorism priority caseload were minors. Right now it's about 20%. That dropped off and come up again. That is too high. I welcome the recent government initiative though, and in particular the help for parents and caregivers, a New South Wales program called Step Together, which will be expanded nationally. That's all about who can they call to get help when their child is locked in their bedroom or trapped online. I also said last night, we're about to enter a period where these minors are coming to an age of adolescence where they've spent all their formative years online, and for some of them, but even if it's a small number, that's still too many, whose whole sense of community and intent is actually from the online world, not the real world. We need the community's help.
And you can see how someone might have a distorted worldview if that's the case.
If that's all you're looking at. That's why we need the community's help. That's why we need the help of big tech.
Are they helping?
Some of them do, some of them don't. And I'm not here to have a go at them, but I'm just saying, surely you would agree with this. It's not healthy if a child is trapped down a rabbit hole of hate. You've got to help us. We've seen that actually you can go from 2 or 3 clicks for something which is benign to something which is objectionable. That should not be possible for adolescent minds.
A couple of quick ones before you go. The Deputy Chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee, Andrew Wallace, said on radio this morning, I can tell you that Labor do not take national security nearly as serious as they should. He was being interviewed off the back of your address last night. What do you say to that? Is there any truth to that?
Well, Kieran, you'd appreciate my job is to not comment on what politicians say. I'll stay out of that. I'm legally required to stay out of it. What I can say, the Parliamentary Joint Committee of Intelligence and Security is an effective body, and I welcome briefing them and the challenge they give us. So that's an effective body. I can also tell you, I know that I'm backed by the government and my people are backed by the government, and I know that my organisation is backed by the Leader of the Opposition. It's an important capability. We'll stay out of the politics. I'll leave that to politicians.
It's an important capability, and you're always looking for others to come and join you. It's looking at the success rate, and touch wood that continues, but you've got the best of the best in there, haven't you?
We do. We have no trouble attracting people, but in this competitive world, we need to be competitive in that market space, and that's why last night was also just a shameless plug. If you want a job that makes a difference, you want to be fulfilled and have a sense of purpose, ASIO's the place, and we need you.
Well, we appreciate your time. I know it's not that often that you speak to us, but we very much appreciate it when you do. So thanks.
Thanks, Kieran.